There's some things in this world that you have to fight for. Experiences, opportunities, knowledge, relationships, they can all pass you by. In a culture that values credit hours and resumes, room for the rugged individual who learns through experience grows smaller and smaller. I find myself torn between professionalizing into an undergraduate with a killer resume who is efficient and valuable in the economy, and answering literature's siren call to take time to read deeply, to ponder, to create something, even if it doesn't translate into resume material.
I was taking a documentary class in Auburn's English department, and for our final project, my professor had given the option of creating a documentary rather than writing a long paper. I know I can write papers, and write them fairly well too. Yet, the more we discussed different documentaries in class, the more I found myself wanting to create one, even though I had never done it before and had absolutely no idea where to begin. And I probably would never have taken that risk, except that Haley, a bright and enthusiastic woman I'd admired in class, asked me to be her partner. And I met Churck Moore at an artist lecture. My friend Rebecca runs a small gallery above a coffee shop in Opelika, and through her I got to meet Churck and see his work. Churck, with his denim shirt, his white beard, and youthful excitement to discuss his art, reminded me why I'm even studying art history in the first place. Churck is a self-taught artist who works in wood, metal, and stone, much of it salvaged from the local textile mills where he's worked his entire life.
So we set out to Valley to see him, armed with instructions to turn right at the new Burger King and left at the softball fields, eyes peeled for the 10-foot sculpture of a man in the yard.
I was in a machine shop in a textile mill from the time I was 17, and when I graduated high school in 1975, I told them, I said, you either give me a job as an electrician or I'm leaving. So they put me with they knew I'd work. I wasn't never out. I worked third shift when I went to school. So, I spent 2 years in school and worked weekends at night. I take found things and make things. I try to make something out of nothing. Sculpture, wood, stone, metal, anything that hits my fancy. If I see something in it, I try to bring it out of it. Years ago, when I first started back in 1974, I started in very soft stuff like wax and chalk, really. In the cotton mill, they had a textile chalk that was about the size of a 50-cent piece and about 4 inches long. And I started carving with a screwdriver as I walked fire watch in the mill full of people. I sprayed them with my mother's hairspray and started selling them. So that's how I got started. The design was basically to show what the stone was. The horse over there was a broken piece of stone. And what caused me to make the horse was I seen the jaw. I mean, that piece of the stone was curved like that. And that's what I seen when I first looked at it. And I was able to chip away the excess and the scale, or what I call scaling it, and get it down to the carvable stone. But this one was a rectangular block that I had purchased. It's harder for me to deal with making things from uniform cuts. It's easier for me to work on a piece of wood or a piece of sculpture when it's got character already there. Good Lord's already put something in it. It's easier for me to work around what's already there rather than having to say, okay, I got a square block. And square blocks I don't do well with. And I don't throw things away. My wife will tell you. There's a whole lot of small ones in here, smaller sculptures. Do y'all want to see them, or do you want to? We got a whole nother house that's full of stuff, larger sculptures, and my studio, my carving area is over there.
When we walked back to Chuck's studio, I didn't know where to look first. Native American faces stared back at me. There were boxes of carefully wrapped sculptures that Churck began to take out one by one. The works weren't on display exactly. Churck was just living with them, surrounded by them. There were sculptures with undulating curves and abstracted figures in polished wood and stone, and complex layers of interlocking gears, tooth saw blades, and other salvaged parts. Some of the sculptures are as tall as a person, imposing their presence on the whole room, while some Churck pulls out of drawers and boxes and offers them to you to hold in your hand. He started showing us the first sculpture where a sort of spirit face emerges from a whirl of shapes.
If you notice, the face doesn't have any definition around it other than the chin, and it's more like a spirit it's an inner thought. And it kind of works its way out of the wood. I think about things, and I'll see the piece of wood, and I'll kind of try to make it do what I want it to do, but you basically have to let it do what it will do. It's meant to feel. I've had a lot of people that come up to it, and they as you can see them draw back, but, touch it. I live with it. That is part of me, and I enjoy doing it. And part of it is I'll close my eyes sometimes and feel the faces, My wife is a nurse, and she works at the hospital, and I had designed the face. Is the only thing on here that I had designed. I had roughed out the face. It was still broken all the way around, or just a rock. And I sent it to work with her, and told them all to handle it. You handle it, touch it. They heal people, they help people, they're all individuals. You have your own issues in life. And when it come back, and I don't know why, that's what I come up with. I'm just a self-taught art. I never had any schooling. I've never had an art class in my life. It's something I love to do and I enjoy doing. When you're doing this, understand I ain't some well-educated, well-taught sculptor. I'm just somebody who, for some reason, has been blessed or cursed with the desire to do this. I can remember being 5 years old, sitting on a porch with my grandfather, and he died when I was 6. But he was the man in the neighborhood that made everybody's butcher knives. He was the man who fixed the canoe in his basement. He was the man who made the walking stick for the old lady that couldn't get up her steps. He was the air raid warden in 1940 in the mill village. But he always was making something. He would sit there and carve a little boat. And here's a 5-year-old that's just intense, So I was raised around people doing things with, none of them were sculptors, but my grandfather made knives. I make knives. People that live around here know, that's the man with the iron people in his front yard, or, that guy's, if you got a piece of wood that looks good, give it to him. He'll do something with it. And that's happened to me multiple times. Man, I just cut down this tree in the backyard. You want a piece of it? That happens regular.
Every stray piece of firewood, remnants of old trees, even the discarded countertops of Auburn University's old lab tables have all been entrusted to Churck in hopes that he can repurpose them and turn them into something new. Churck is both a recipient of people's would-be garbage and also a collector, a curator of the parts that made the mills run. These were the mills that framed his life.
This come out of Langdale Mill. It was put in 1890. This beam was taken out in 1993 by my brother and the company he worked for, and it was the floor of Langdale Mill. These pines were so valuable. Slasher strength. They used to make ship masts out of them because they put in that mill in 1908. Car 25. The railroad car was being disassembled in 1985 or 86. We got out when I was weather resistant in 98. Straight and pretty straight grain, So these are patterns for casting. It's cobweb on it. These are made of wood, but they actually would cast metal parts out of these. These are patterns, and they were going to burn them. When they moved the foundry from West Point area right there where Point Universities took over some of the buildings, they had to get rid of all these parts because they were up there. Some of them were dated back in the 40s. Some of these numbers here are foundry numbers, and all these old parts. You know, a guy that worked at the foundry said, "Man, you got to come up here and see this." So he knew what I did, and he was a real nice guy. And he said, "You know, you need to come get these things. Somebody's got to do something with them." So I got probably 5 truckloads of this stuff. It's just unbelievable. Some of this dusty. Some of these, do you know what it takes to make something like that out of a piece of wood? These were artists, and they were just burning it. I've got this stuff stored everywhere, and I started thinking, well, what can I do? So I started putting these collages together. A lot of the people that they had working for them, they may have had an engineer that would lay it out on paper, but they'd give it to Mr. So-and-so who, you know, maybe had a 8th grade education, but he was damn good at what he did. You try to make that out of a piece of wood and tell me it doesn't take talent to do that. So that's why I don't want things, you know, when I seen them going to burn them, it was just like, oh shit, I can't let that happen, you know. So consequently, I got a barn full of them. What I want to do is get some from each one of the mills and make as many sculptures as I can out of them, because you can go up and look at that scab that's left on this land up here, and that's all you're going to know. People your age are not going to know what that was. I spent my life working in it, you know, and if I can preserve the metal sculpture from the parts and pieces, the wood sculpture from the actual building itself.
Chuck's stories seem to blur the line between past and present. He speaks about the historic past as though he knows it intimately, and that without him, people like me and Chloe, young people who learned history by a textbook with chapters entitled Textiles in the South and How Native Americans Lived, would only ever hear the distant, glossy versions of these stories.
I can imagine exactly the kind of textbook chapter you're talking about, with a boxed feature illustrating wigwams and even a primary source telling the legend of the bluebonnet. And there's a place for that in the classroom. But Chuck offers a story and an experience that's much richer.
Have you ever picked an arrowhead up? Have you ever been arrowhead hunting? Oh, my father loved it. I loved roaming in the woods, and I don't know, it's just something special about walking through this plowed up field and picking up this beautiful arrowhead that somebody hundreds of years ago made that was exceptionally smart. I mean, you don't just do that. I've tried making them. You know, it's difficult. And I've always loved it. I've always been so interested in it. And they were here way before we were. Used to, when I was a kid, people would plow up a cotton field or a cornfield, you know, and we'd wait till it rained, and we'd spend our Saturday evening and Sundays walking this field, and there's nothing better than that feeling of just looking down and seeing that arrowhead laying there and picking it up. This piece is a piece of the wood out of Shawmut. The beam was 16 by 13 and a half. I designed a female Indian face. She's got 3 feathers in her hair, corn, squash, and beans, because that's the main thing that sustained them. But she's standing in a cornfield. It's called Mother Corn. You got a corn stalk here. And you have one here. And Indians always thought of corn as fertility. Their life depended on it. They were, you know, if they had a bad year, drought or too much rain or whatever, they didn't eat. If you think about it, Indians had corn that they raised from grasses over eons. I mean, it didn't get to be the ears of corn we know without selective breeding. And, we did away with that. And if we have performed genocide on any group of people in this world as the American Indian, we either assimilated them, sent them off to the desert, or killed them. It's all changed. It's all changed. That was once held the roof up that employed hundreds of people, and there's no more. The Indians used to farm this land these houses are sitting on, or either hunt it, one or the other, because there's a creek right down here. And I've found arrowheads walking down through there. So, they used to have this place. So everything has changed. The textile mills did not require a degree. I've never had any electrical training either, but I ended up being a plant engineer. They used basic knowledge. And having started from the very bottom and went all the way up, I ended up being an assistant engineer at Fairview plant. Now they don't even talk to you if you're somebody like me who come up from the bottom who don't have that piece of paper saying that I went to school. And don't get me wrong, schools, hang in there. Do it. That way you can hand them that piece of paper and they'll take you seriously. They look at me and they think, they don't take you seriously because you don't have it. I ended up with, right before we shut down, I had 47 employees and 2 mills. They're all closed. Everything is closed down and sent overseas. The company is gone. My great-grandfather was brought here in 1915 because he had 14 children, and they moved him in next door to the mill because he had a built-in workforce. This is in Fairfax. That mill was built in 1915, and that's where I went to work in 1974. My great-grandfather, my grandfather, and all his brothers and sisters lived in a mill village like this one. This house was built as a mill village house, and the company basically owned it. You worked in the mill. They took the rent out of your paycheck or pay token, so it was. Everything revolved around that company here for so many years, and then when the economy is like it is and textiles was shipped overseas, it's now made in China, India, Pakistan, and all over the place other than here. So everything has changed. I don't do well with change. Do you all? You do? That's good. I think not dealing with change makes it harder on you because something's always going to change. People are going to grow old, they're going to die. My daddy used to be the strongest thing I know. Now I have to help him up. It gets to the point where I can't make these things because one day it'll be that way. Life changes. It's painful sometimes. I'm breathing dust, I'm burning myself. I've got when I wail, it's, you burn yourself. There's things that happen. That dust there makes my sinuses plug slap up, This does too. This has got sulfur in it and horrible taste in your mouth when you work this piece of stone. There's bad points to it, but, I'm thinking, damn, why do I do this to myself? Because it's time consuming, it's tedious, it's hard work, but yet if I don't do it, I'm miserable. It's something that I need to do for myself, and I do it for myself. And my children don't even know, well, Daddy, what are we going to do with it? What are we going to do with it? I posed that question to you all up there in the color room. What are you going to do with it? There's a pile of it. It's just going to go to pieces. to love high places, climbing high places. And we used to climb water towers around here. Now, they didn't want you to do this now. We would do it sometimes at night, you know. And back then I was young and invincible, you know. I found out I wasn't. But I got a picture of me standing there in a pair of blue jeans and no shirt on and my hair down to here and a big red beard flying a kite on top of a water tower. And it was a blast. And my cousin has got a Polaroid camera. He's got his feet hooked in the ladder, leaning backwards, taking a picture of me. He and I were best friends and ran together and got in trouble together and all the stuff that you do.
At the end of our interview, as Churck left us with one final injunction, it was this crystallized image of reckless, carefree youth, Churck atop a water tower, flying a kite and reaching for the sky, that filled my mind.
Is there anything else you want to tell us?
I guess one thing, it's like what I presented to you three up there in the overall company's gallery. You see this stuff, you know that it takes time to do it, but what am I going to do with it? I mean, that's something at this stage in my life to where I've come up and, you know, I'm 57. It hurts to do this stuff. I'm going to continue as long as I can, but then I think, why am I doing this? You know, where's it going to go? You know, this is so heavy, I have to have help to get it out of the house. You know, I had to have help to get it up them steps. That was tough. So, you know, I guess that's the only thing that I'm concerned about now is what's going to become of it. Because it's been so much of my life and so much of me that when I die, my children see it as, oh, that Daddy did that, that's good. Now, what are we having for supper? You know, and I fear that that's what will happen to it, is it'll get sold at a damn yard sale for 50 cents a piece. And, you know, and I guess that's the thing I'll leave you with is, you know, you're in a art appreciation situation. You're the people that can do something about that.
Haley and I are just two undergrad students. We practically had to move the earth just to get permission to borrow the audio recorder from our university. We don't have a lot of power in the art world, to say the least. And suddenly, Churck wasn't just explaining his work so that we could make a documentary of it for our English class. He was actually asking us for help.
So we decided to enlist the help of a friend who is an amateur photographer and document Churck's best work, and began sending out a few feelers to local museums to see if any would be interested in acquiring one of his sculptures. I don't know that any museum around here will be able to absorb the sheer volume of Churck's entire collection as he would like, but perhaps I'm just thinking too small. After all, Churck's already won a grant for a public sculpture.
In 2000, the state of Alabama gave me a grant. Stay down, baby. Sit. Good girl, sweetheart. You stay, baby. You stay. See, I'm excited. They gave me a commission to build the Iron Man, which is located in Lanedale. It's 8 foot 4 inches tall. It weighs 2,810 pounds. Car 25. The railroad car was being disassembled in 1985 or 86. And I went by the yard, and the man said he would sell me the parts and pieces for what he'd get for scrap. I gathered that it laid under that wonder for several years, and finally I come up with a design, took it to the city. I was on the art council then, and they said, if you can build it, we'll put a grant in for it. And I said, well, I can build it. And I'm thinking, Jesus, what the hell I can build this damn thing? Because I didn't know, you know. And I submitted a single drawing, and they accepted it. I wanted to build it because I saw it laying there in that yard, and I saw that in my brain. I saw the man. I said, man, I got to be a man in there, you know. So, and I just wanted to use those parts because that railroad's been decommissioned, and that's some of the only stuff that's left of it. So it was saved for that too.
When Churck devotes his time, energy, and resources to making a sculpture, he doesn't do so in anticipation of earning an A or of gaining an honor to list on his resume. And when he finishes, he doesn't even seek the kind of gratification and approval that comes from posting photos to Facebook. Rather, he sits down to work motivated purely by the anticipation of making something beautiful.
It gives me value in myself. And I don't want this to sound arrogant in any way, but it has to do with the fact that I feel that I can do this. Nobody taught me how to do this. I worked at it, and I earned the right to be able to do it because I've cut my fingers and I've got the splinters out of my hands. You know, I've taught myself to do it, and it gives me inside of myself value. And I guess that's another reason that I can't go without doing it, because I have to maintain that value to myself, and it does affect who I am. I don't do this for a living. I do this for my soul. You know, I do this because I want to do this.